A New Day with Dr. Tammy Bradshaw Scott, a program dedicated to addressing current issues and offering solutions and hope for each new day. Dr. Tammy is a registered psychologist and licensed marriage and family therapist with degrees in clinical psychology. And now, here is your host for A New Day, Dr. Tammy.
More than 90% of people getting married by age 50, and research supporting the positive and physical and mental health benefits of a happily married life, the topic of marriage becomes an important conversation. We, as a nation, are still hovering between 41 to 50% divorce rate, depending on the research. This number continues to be a very sad statistic. Approximately half of all marriages will end in divorce. And the divorce rate for second marriages climbs up to over 60%, with third marriages at almost 80%. The problem with divorce is that it hurts everyone, especially if there are children involved. No one wins in a divorce. However, I do believe that no one should remain in a marriage where someone is being harmed, especially children. There are particular circumstances in which there is no way to avoid divorce. But from my experience as a therapist, people leave marriages for reasons that could otherwise be solved. Today, we will be discussing how to have a healthy marriage, and we will also share with you the secrets that influence a long and enjoyable life with your spouse. We have some very special guests on today, a married couple with us, and they will be sharing their personal experience and what they have learned along the way after many years of marriage. Please join me in welcoming Hayne and Rochelle Balcom. Well, welcome you two.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here today.
It's good to be here.
Let's start with just basic introduction of who you are and how long you've been married.
Okay. Hayne and I have been married for 55 years.
Wow.
I was a child bride.
I believe it.
Yes. And originally I came from Ohio, and when my parents moved here, I came with them. And I graduated from college when I was 50 because I stayed home to raise our children.
Wonderful.
And that was the important thing for me to do.
Awesome. That is wonderful. Thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And I am Hayne Balcom, and I come from North Carolina. And when
Yay for North Carolina.
Yay. And like Rochelle said, we've been married for 55 years.
So 55 years, that is just astounding, astounding. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Well, and this is why we, loved having you here today to talk about your years of experience. You are obviously very seasoned. I know that you have gone through a lot over the years, and would just love to have you share with us what this has been like for you. Starting with, how did you meet? And how old were you roughly when you got married? I don't want to give away. We won't be doing a math out there in our heads.
Well, no, you will be doing the math. Actually, we met when we at work. And he had decided early on that he would not date anyone from work.
Because it supposedly never works out.
That's correct.
But it did. We went and played tennis together, though neither of us played tennis, but we did.
Okay.
Yes.
When I saw her the first day she came to work and thought, wow, she looks a lot more sophisticated and older than the other girls around here. And this was back in the days when girls had their hair up in like beehives. She didn't have hers that way. It was a French roll, very sophisticated looking.
That set her apart. No beehive.
That set her apart. And so I couldn't wait to meet this girl. So she was talking to another girl in line. And I knew that other girl, so I went to that other girl's office, and she introduced me to her new office mate. And I think that was the first day she was at work, so I figured I had a good start.
Okay.
And then after we'd been dating for a while, I asked her one night how old she was. I'm 26 at that time.
Oh, no.
And she said, I'm 19 and a half. So I had to recalibrate a little bit, but thought, okay, this is going to be worth it.
The half was very important there,
It was.
right?
At
You
that
had
time,
to
yes.
add that. Okay, okay. So did you have to go to her parents and get permission? I mean, this was a different day when that was expected.
But I did meet her parents before we had an official date.
And how was that?
Well, her mother said to her, is that knocky-kneed guy coming up here the one you're talking about? It was me.
Okay. And the two of you began dating.
We began dating, and like he said, I was somewhat of a Christian and he was an agnostic. And I felt as we started dating that maybe he wasn't right for me,
Okay.
and a little pompous and
Yeah,
things.
you must have had some interesting
So
conversations.
I called it off,
Okay.
and which was a good thing, which sent him down to a wonderful church in Hollywood, Hollywood Presbyterian Church.
Okay.
And after a month, we resumed our relationship.
Okay.
And then during that time, we both really rededicated our lives to the Lord.
Oh, wonderful.
And
Okay.
that cinched it.
Okay, okay, so then you were really on the same page.
Yes,
were.
we
Okay.
were.
So this, just an interesting thought here, when you're dating, couples dating, and they have, obviously we have differences in our beliefs and opinions and things like that. In hindsight now, looking at those early years of dating, do you feel that that was something very important, that you were both really on the same page with your faith?
Absolutely, because the scripture does say that we're not to be unequally yoked. And so as we started to grow in our relationship to the Lord, then even on our dates, I believe, did we start to pray together a little bit?
Yeah, we did.
I think we did. And so after we were married, then our Christian faith continued to grow.
Okay, that's wonderful. And you dated for how long?
Let's see. We had our first date on Halloween,
Oh, okay.
and we
Trick or
got,
treating? Handing out candy?
Oh, kind of, sort of. Actually, my mother and he and I
Okay.
would go out and knock on doors and run, and beep horns and run. So we had fun together.
We used to do that. Yes, we used to do that.
Yes.
Okay, that's fun.
her mother became one of my advocates, I think, for Rochelle. So she was.
Okay. So she was
just-
in your corner.
She was in my corner.
Yes.
She was just
Won her over.
She was a fun woman to be with.
Great.
And we dated about 2 years.
About 2 years,
Yes.
okay. So, before we go into your marriage and the wonderfulness of that and challenges, what would you say to young folks today who are dating and considering marriage? Because this is such an important time. And clearly you have enough experience and time, behind you now to realize what were some of the positive, the good things, and maybe things you should have been cautious about. What would you say to young people when they're considering and they're actually dating, or even people who are older, who are still in the field of dating?
Well, I guess one of the things was that we did start praying together.
Okay.
Let me say that the night that we accepted Christ, me for the first time, and her as a rededication,
Okay.
and we didn't know it. I did it a few minutes before her, and then I walked out of a room with the guy who just led me to Christ. And Rochelle was in this back room. We were at a party at a private home, a party from church.
Okay.
And the girl that was talking to Rochelle looked at the guy who I was walking with and said, "Can we borrow that Bible you have?" And then she kind of led Rochelle to a place of rededication.
Interesting. Wow.
We didn't know for sure what we'd done, but we kind of floated home when we drove home
Okay.
that night.
Okay. so that brought you
Together.
together.
It did.
Okay.
But for people who are, young people who are
Yes.
dating, like we have given some slight counsel to our one of our grandsons, is take it slow
Yes.
and have fun.
Okay.
And I think it's important that they talk about issues. And the more they can talk and share their thoughts and ideas and beliefs is very important.
Yes. To make sure that they are truly going to be compatible.
Exactly.
Because when what do we say about after 6 months, 9 months, when all that newness,
Wears off.
infatuation has worn off, then you
Yeah.
have substance there. Okay.
Yeah, well, I didn't know you felt that way. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it's very important. And Hayden and I have also given a book out to some of our grandchildren,
Okay.
and in fact our daughter also. And it's a book of questions. You know, who makes breakfast in the morning? Who does the laundry? Who does the checkbook? You know, the silly thing. Well, which way does the toilet paper roll?
Yeah. Those everyday living situations
Exactly.
that can.
And
yeah.
how do you feel about, you know, abortion, or are you a Republican or a Democrat, or, you know, I mean,
Okay.
all of the questions that you can answer to get that feedback from one
Yes.
another.
When we gave that book to our daughter and her, it was still boyfriend, I think.
Okay.
But it was, obviously, it was a serious relationship. And we gave it to him, and she was in school in San Diego, and he was working in San Diego. And they were up one weekend, and we gave him that book and told him what it was. It was a bunch of questions that people who might be contemplating marriage or a serious relationship should talk about.
Right.
And later that day, we walked back by the room in which Anne and Michael were talking.
Yes.
And they had the book out before them, and they were having a very heated discussion because they hadn't thought about whatever the question was
Yes.
before.
Yes.
And they were really talking it out.
That's
So-
right, and this is why we actually recommend, as a therapist, I recommend premarital counseling because for this very reason. You know, I bring up some of those tough questions. Now, when so you got married after 2 years of dating. What were the first, let's say, the first 7 years? Because research shows that most people, those folks of the 41 to 50% who divorce, it actually happens in those first approximately 7 to 8 years. What were those years briefly like for you?
Well, they certainly were different.
Different?
Yes.
You're staying on the safe side here, right?
I am. We had a lot to learn about each other. And, you know, when two people come together, they come from different backgrounds. But what we were finding is that here were my strengths and here were Haynes' strengths,
Yes.
but we complemented each other.
But I don't know if we learned that we were complementary. It was more that we were different that we were seeing in those first years, I think.
Any
Well, that's
sparks,
true,
you
but,
know?
but this was coming together.
Okay.
Yes.
And that is the great reality. We are quite different.
Yes.
But where I am weak, she's strong.
Yes.
And vice versa. So there's so much that we can learn and just help each other live.
Yes. But different, but compatible.
Yes.
So that's the important thing, what you said a moment ago about those very important issues such as your faith and, you know, those issues that will really determine, you know, when you need it to have that substance in the relationship, in the marriage. After all, the ooey gooey feelings, you know, have worn off, but you have a substance of a marriage there. But different in that, I like how you said it, Rochelle, that your strengths, you brought your strengths, Hayne, you brought your strengths, and you really balance each other. I think that, you know, God is most wise in the way He brings us together that way to complement, and that's the whole point and the purpose, right? So in those first early years, it was different.
It was.
How did you, you know, some of those difficult moments when you come up to differences in your argument, your first argument, or, you know, how did you resolve? What did you do to resolve those issues?
You know, some of the premarital counseling we had told us about a verse in Scripture that says, "Be angry, but do not sin. do not let the sun go down on your anger.
My grandmother used to say that to me. I wonder why.
So, since some of the times when I got home, the sun had already gone down, we couldn't do that literally.
Okay.
So what we took it was that don't go to sleep while you're still angry. This meant that sometimes we were sitting up on our bed, hardly able to keep our eyes open, but still trying to talk through it.
Yes.
Until finally we had resolved it. We'd kiss and flop down in bed.
Okay.
And there was another one that I had to learn.
Okay.
And that was, if we got into a big argument, I could not leave.
Oh.
Now, we lived in a little apartment upstairs and it had a balcony. So I could walk out on the balcony to cool down a little bit.
Okay.
But I couldn't go get in my car.
Okay. I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
That was important.
Yes, absolutely. Resolving those issues and not taking them into the night, not carrying them, really prevents you from developing resentments.
It builds.
Yes.
And the resentment builds from day to day to day.
Yes.
And I don't know if this is in addition to, but when we did have an argument, and we have had to learn this, that I would not say to him, well, you always do this or this or this.
Uh-huh.
And so we would talk,
Okay.
and after it was pretty much resolved, it still took me a day or two to kind of think through all that we had talked about, and then I felt better.
Okay.
But then I was able to say, this, with this situation, this is how it made me feel.
Okay. In that, Rochelle, I'm hearing you say that you consciously made some choices.
Yes.
One was you didn't bring up past trespasses,
No,
if you will.
we never
you didn't
brought
bring
up
up
past issues.
things that, and I see that often with couples, that they're just constantly rehashing and not able to let go. And that's one of the killers of a marriage, is holding on to resentments and not letting those things go and continually bringing them up, instead of actually really doing the whole forgiveness thing and
Right.
being able to move past that.
Right.
But it's a choice, correct?
It is a choice, and neither of us, I don't think, has ever done that. Well, you remember 2 years ago you did X.
Yes.
That's gone.
Great.
It's the issue at hand.
Okay.
And
What
the-
do you do with it when it's in your heart? When you're still just thinking, oh, that just was,
Well,
that Hayne, he just,
that's why what she just said, there was a big difference between the two of us.
okay,
If we had gotten it resolved, I thought it was resolved.
okay,
I had to learn that Rochelle needs more time.
okay,
And so she might need a day or two.
Sure.
And I just didn't grasp that. It took me a while to learn that I had to give her some space or some time
right.
before we see if it's really resolved.
Okay, and you know, that is, I'm not doing a stereotypical here, okay? Right. But generally speaking, that men are more likely to do that, and that is easier for them to move forward to the next thing, because they are able to compartmentalize better than women. Women tend to be more gifted with the multitasking because as moms, and you
Yes.
have all these things going. But this is an important factor for couples to realize, that just because you're able to move forward and you're moving on to the next thing, that to be sensitive to your spouse, especially the woman, often will need to really, as you said, Rochelle, process that.
Yes.
And really put it to rest in your heart.
Exactly.
Or else it will fester and come
Yes,
up. Right?
exactly.
Okay. So you get past the milestone of the 7-8 years, and can you share with us some of the, what would you say were some of the pitfalls, so to speak, of areas that you would get stuck in, or that you realized early on was harmful to the marriage? So things that you learned, that's not a good place to go, or that's not how we should handle this, that other married couples could really benefit from.
What do you think?
I don't know. I was hoping you'd answer that one.
Okay, passing the buck. Okay.
There was a time when we lived in one city. He worked outside the city, an hour and a half away, and he worked very long hours. And our children were very young, and
Which caused a lot of stress on you.
which yes, and he, with the long hours, he would come home late and leave very early, and then he would sleep most of Saturday, and on Sunday we pretended that we were a happily married couple. And so this had to be resolved because it was escalating. And so I think for our situation only, and you know, we were still kind of newly married in a way. Our children were 3 and 5, and so we were probably into our 9th year,
Something like that.
something like there, that we do have to consider each other
Yes.
and be kind to each other. And it's not that he was trying to be mean or spend as
He
many...
was doing his thing. He
He
was
was
working,
doing
providing
his
for the
work.
family, and yes.
And I was with the children all day,
Yes.
and I really wanted some help, but there was no help.
And this is a common problem that comes up
Yes.
for married couples. How
And-
did you resolve this?
We resolved it by moving out close to the work that I had.
Okay. Okay.
And that lasted for about 6 months, and then the company I was with started having financial problems. So we closed down
Okay.
that place, and my work was, we had now moved to Redlands.
Okay.
And my work was now in downtown Los Angeles at the One Wilshire building. Previously, it had taken me, after I talked to the highway patrolman, about an hour to get to work.
Oh my goodness.
And that was going
Okay.
against traffic. Now
Yes.
I had to go further with traffic
Okay.
So-
you made some adjustments
to try to
which-
solve it.
to solve that, because you know, Rochelle, I hear from a lot of women in that situation where they are frustrated because their husband is providing, doing, you know, a good thing to provide for the family, but she is at home with the children
Yes.
and trying to, so putting the marriage first, you know, listening, like you said, listening to one another and making those adjustments that can really be helpful. What would you say has been the strength of your marriage? I know the Lord has been, your faith in Him has really been the glue in your marriage, but what would you say are some of the aspects of your marriage that you have really worked on and strengthened your marriage? So what are some of those things that you have done?
Go ahead, Annie.
We learned some things. We learned a lot in the premarital counseling we went
Okay.
to. One of them was, when you get married, you don't consider it's a 50-50 deal. Because if that were the case, I would think, well, okay, I have come halfway.
I did half of the dishes, the other half are yours.
That's right.
Yeah, but that's not right. It needs to be 100% on both sides. You're willing to go
Okay.
until you're ready to hug again.
Okay.
So that
I
was
like
that was a big factor for us. Another one was, we learned there that marriage is not a contract. It's a 3-way covenant.
Okay.
The Lord, Rochelle, and me.
Okay.
And when you think of it that way, you just can't break that.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And I need to be supportive of him and whatever work he chose, because there were times that we had to move from California to North Carolina to France, back to North Carolina to
So
California.
you had to be flexible.
And so we've moved a lot. But I think support
Yes.
for what my husband is doing is very important.
And support for my wife going back to school
Okay.
and at the age she did was very important.
Yes. So it sounds like the two of you really giving to one another and supporting one another in what is important for each of you in your roles. As we're, you know, ending here today, I could just sit here for hours and talk to you too. Just your rich, rich experience, words of wisdom. What is it that you would say to our audience members today, the younger people, even those who have been in a marriage for a while and feel like this is just, I just want to leave this marriage, it's not working, I'm not happy. Any final thoughts, words of wisdom to help
Well,
them?
number one, I would say pray. And number two, talk. Just talk as much as you can and get everything onto the table. And be kind to one another. Because, the saying goes, sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And that is so untrue.
Right.
Our words are everything. And how we say our words, and just be supportive.
Yes.
That what he does, I will support him.
Fantastic. Hayne, what about yourself?
Well, one of the things, again, I think this is something we probably learned in premarital counseling, and that is you decide up front that there is no possibility of a divorce. I think I heard, it may have been Ruth Graham, someone said, asked her a similar question. She said, I never considered divorce. Shooting, maybe.
Yes, it was Ruth. Said about Billy.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
Okay, that's fantastic. And going into a marriage with that idea in mind. And as I shared in the opening, of course, there are times where a marriage does not work for very serious reasons. And I never, as a therapist, advocate someone staying in marriage where children are being harmed or the spouse is being harmed, something like that. But I do believe that over the course of these years, folks give up too soon. They give up and they are not in it for the commitment. They're not in it for the long haul. And it is a commitment. It's not a passing emotion. It is a continual devotion to one another in a marriage. And that means, kind of dying to our own selves and encouraging the other person when they want to go back to school and doing those things that is helpful for them. So, thank you so much. God bless you both so much. And congratulations to 55 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today here on A New Day.
This viewer-supported program is made possible by viewers like you. Your support is invaluable and appreciated. To send a gift or for more information, please contact Dr. Tammy at the address on your screen. And thank you for joining us for A New Day.